Let's get it cracking. Let's start the session. Mars Lynch, the competition, balls by that action. You can never debate it. This is actual fact. Stephen A. with the flavor, baby. I skip through a track. I'm like, say what? Say what? What's up with all my haters? I'm a ball when I perform. Till my jersey's in the air. I'm allergic to my haters. Every morning I prepare. 4 takes, that's you. 3 takes, not me. 2 takes if you lucky. First take, stop me. 4 takes, that's you. 3 takes, not me. 2 takes if you lucky. First take, you got me.
ESPN's Zach Lowe wrote a column on whether the Warriors should take on more star power by going after OKC's Kevin Durant during free agency, but risk breaking up their core. So think about it. 2 MVPs playing together in Durant and also Steph Curry. So guys, should the Warriors sign KD? George, I'll go to you first.
I don't think there's any question. Like, okay, first of all, we have to start with if he'll leave OKC. If he does leave Oklahoma City, Golden State is the place for him to be. What's been the biggest knock on Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook's relationship? It's been that, oh, one guy defers to the other and no one's really the alpha dog, yada, yada, which is all nonsense. We all know that. So if he goes to the Warriors, a team that loves to share the ball, you got Draymond Green with 11 triple-doubles this season, the most of anyone in the NBA this year. We know how great Steph Curry is at sharing the ball. They move the ball well as it is. Yeah, he fits perfectly there because everyone loves to give the other guy shots and the other guy opportunities, so he's going to be able to get his. Now, will there be some sacrifice? Sure, there's always some sacrifice. We saw that with LeBron, Wade, and Bosh a couple of years ago in Miami. But I think with that team, the concept that they have offensively, the way they already move the ball and share the ball, if he's going to leave Oklahoma City, that makes the most sense. And to be honest, the Warriors don't have to do all that much to fit him in. They don't have to re-sign Harrison Barnes. They may have to move either Ezeli or Bogut and maybe one other piece as far as their bench is concerned. But to add that kind of star power, to me, all of a sudden makes them a shoo-in to be a legitimate dynasty for the next decade, basically.
So George starts out, no question, that if he's available, the Warriors should go for Durant. Now, I don't think the risk is for Durant. The question isn't should he go to the Warriors? The question is, should the Warriors take on Durant? And I think that definitely has some questions. Now, in the end, I'll tell you, George, I agree. You follow talent. In this case, phenomenal talent. In this case, top 3 NBA talent. But it's not a no-question debate. It's not a lay-down-your-cards, game-over debate. The debate is chemistry versus talent. You're talking about a team that's winning by an average of 13 points per 100 possessions. You're talking about a team that's 50, what are they now, 50-5, who's challenging the Bulls for the best record of all time. This team has that secret ingredient that every team tries to capture, which is this team can play together. They have chemistry. Does Durant fit in, as you said, and start sharing the ball, passing it around? There's some unknowns in that. He does hold the ball at times. He does sit there and jab step and then go to the basket. He sometimes doesn't pass as well as these guys on the Warriors do. That all being said, if you and I are the GMs and sitting there together, I'm signing off on this deal because it's pretty simple. This is Kevin Durant. And in a year, you're going to be paying a ton of money to guys like Harrison Barnes, who could possibly be making, according to Zach Lowe on ESPN.com, $5 million less than Durant next year. That's what tips the scales for me. You're paying only $5 million more than you would for Harrison Barnes. So yes, it's guys like possibly Andrew Bogut. It's guys like Sean Livingston and Harrison Barnes versus Kevin Durant. Ultimately, you take the risk with your chemistry and say, I'm with Kevin Durant.
Freddie, are you on board like these guys are?
Well, when you get a guy averaging over 27 points for his career, shooting over 38% from the three-point line for his career, 53% from the field for his career, and 88% from the free throw line for his career, oh, hell yeah, it's a no-brainer. I mean, if you're a Golden State Warriors team, as great as they've been, you get a chance to bring a guy to your team because I don't think there's any doubt that Kevin Durant may think about it. He's going to look that way, but he's going to make the ultimate decision. I still wonder if he wants to leave Oklahoma City or maybe go somewhere else. But in terms of the chemistry standpoint, you don't want to be the guy that messes that up if you're Kevin Durant. So whatever sacrifices you feel you're going to have to make, you better be on board with that because if you're not, they're going to look at you and say, well, they were just fine without you. Even though we know that Harrison Barnes, Ezeli, Bogut are nowhere collectively near the talent of Kevin Durant. But when you're a superstar, and superstars can be very prickly, they can be very sensitive. Can he deal with that? Let's say he goes there and Golden State doesn't win a championship. All of a sudden, people are going to say, well, wait a minute, Kevin Durant, what are you not doing? Or what were you doing that led to all of this? So if anybody's going to make that ultimate sacrifice and know they have to be on board with that, a guy like Kevin Durant is going to be very, very attractive. That being said, if you're Golden State, to Will's point, are you willing to mess up that chemistry that has been a hallmark what you've been able to do? Remember, last year, this team won 67 games. They weren't that far away from the Bulls' mark of 72, with essentially Steph Curry, Klay Thompson doing their thing and having great pieces around them. Those guys fit together so well. You bring in a guy like that that's been a terrific scorer that may be able to sacrifice, will still wonder if that question is going to be answered. But if you bring him in, if he's not able to do that, there are going to be a lot of people saying, well, you had what you wanted. It was working out. Why take a chance, even though that talent is a significant talent like Kevin Durant?
It's not like we haven't seen this before, okay? We've seen the Jordan teams win a championship and then all of a sudden shake up the roster a little bit. Dennis Rodman all of a sudden is on the team. We saw the Houston Rockets go from a team without Clyde Drexler to a team with Clyde Drexler that won a championship. So we've seen these things before. This isn't unprecedented by any stretch of the imagination. I know we made a big deal of LeBron going to Miami and the hoopla surrounding that. And I think if, in essence, that's actually helping Kevin Durant with this move because he's not going to get criticized the way LeBron did, even though it's a completely different situation. Like Wade had won a championship, but Bosh hadn't, and obviously LeBron hadn't at that point. In this case, Durant would be joining a team that's already won at least one championship, maybe another one, depending on what happens this season. But yeah, I don't think this is ridiculous. I think this makes sense for all sides. And again, if you just look at the way that Durant has been criticized, he's been criticized most for being a guy that defers to Russell Westbrook. So if that's the criticism, he's going to fit in perfectly with a team that already has an established core and already has won championships and has a protocol on how they move the ball.
Of all the superstars in the league and all the teams that could integrate a superstar, this would actually be the best fit because Durant is, among the superstars, the most selfless. And the Warriors already have players who are willing to accept secondary roles.
Yeah.
Thompson, Green are happy to play second, maybe third fiddle to Curry. You would think that Durant could fit into that chain of command, that hierarchy.
Would he be okay being second fiddle as well?
I don't think he'd sign up if he wasn't okay.
Right.
He wouldn't go to the Warriors if he wasn't okay. That being said, somebody needs to tap the brakes on this a tad bit because I do think we're saying, you know, definitely you should do it. And definitely and Freddie, you said the Warriors have been just fine. We need to say they've been more than just fine.
No, I'm talking about chemistry standpoint.
There's a question here. How much better could the Warriors be? I mean, how much better can you actually be than the way you are right now?
82
and 0. Well, there you go, George.
Well, that's never going to happen, 82 and 0. But to your point in terms of what I mean by chemistry being just fine, because they are just fine because that's been able to work with them. This is the
My only point is it's more than just fine.
Okay,
these guys are
fine.
as good as it gets. So what's the point in layering on something else?
Well, because you can't stay complacent. Like, that's just the reality. If you look at teams that have stayed complacent in NBA history, those teams generally tend to fall off at some point or another. You can't just... When the salary cap becomes a factor, and you made the point earlier about Harrison Barnes, you start looking at that cost analysis, right? And you think Barnes makes what? Let's just use these mythical numbers: $25 million, and Durant's going to make 30. Like, why wouldn't you make that deal?
Absolutely, and also that's why I agree with you guys. If it came down to it, because staying complacent actually isn't an option. Status quo isn't an option. Your team as the Warriors will be different next year. Will it be different with Harrison Barnes making a ton of money? Or will it be different with Kevin Durant on your roster? I'll take the Kevin Durant option.
And without Steph Curry on the floor, they're minus 136 in terms of points. So if you have another option, Kevin Durant, when you bring in guys, isn't it great that, okay, Kevin, stay out there. We're going to give Steph Curry a break, and our offense is not going to suffer, number one. Number two, can you imagine pick and roll, when you're running pick and roll or down screens, where your options are Klay Thompson or Kevin Durant? That's an embarrassment of riches if you're Golden State. And in the NBA, either you stay ahead or the next thing you know, that passes you by. We've seen plenty of teams where it looked like, well, we thought Oklahoma City, they didn't win against Miami. A lot of people thought, okay, that was just a one-year thing, they're going to be ready. Well, we're still waiting for that in Oklahoma City. And don't think that doesn't weigh on the mind of Kevin Durant because he's still only 27 years of age. But if he gets to a point where he's looking and saying, okay, we've done all we can, we may not be able to get this done. They brought in a different coach. We have different players, and yet we're still in the same boat. If anything, we're behind where we were when we got to the NBA Finals. That's also going to weigh on his mind to say, if I have to go somewhere else and try to make it work, I got to look at better situations where I'm a lot closer to a championship than maybe I am right now in Oklahoma City.
So let's go ahead and talk about KD, because he's been in the league for 9 seasons now. OKC has made the playoffs in each of the last 5 seasons. They made the NBA Finals once, and you talked about that. OKC has never won an NBA title while he's been there. So so that's got to be on his mind. But leaving OKC would mean breaking up with his co-star in Russell Westbrook. So should Durant consider leaving OKC? Not just talking about Golden State, but just flat out leave OKC.
Okay, so we're flipping the equation. Now we're taking it from Durant's perspective. If I'm Kevin Durant, I do not leave Oklahoma City. I don't go join up with the super team in Golden State to try to win a title. But that's really my personal subjective way that I'd like to think I operated my career. When LeBron and Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh went to Miami together to create their super team, I didn't like it. I don't like the best players on the floor or on the playground saying, hey, let's team up and destroy everybody. It doesn't feel natural. It doesn't feel like a team built the way you want to see a team built. And if I'm that player, Prim, I want to be, honestly, I want to be Kobe. I want to be Dirk. I want to be a guy that lives with the franchise for 20 years, who's responsible for them winning 50 games over a 15-year period. I want to be Tim Duncan, who brings championships to a team and earns it over the long haul. I honestly want that loyalty and that reverence that goes with having a relationship with a fan base and an organization over a long period of time. And Kevin Durant can do that in Oklahoma City. I believe he and Westbrook together can win a championship. Just tough it out. Figure it out. One caveat. If Westbrook leaves a year after and Kevin knows that Westbrook's going to leave, that changes everything.
I was going to say, that throws your argument right out the window.
Yeah. Look, here's the thing about Kevin Durant. If he stays in Oklahoma City, he may or may not win a championship. But if he goes to Golden State, I'm almost positive he's going to win one. So what ends up happening is, in basketball, this is how and in sports in general, we do this with everybody, whether it's Dan Marino in the NFL, Charles Barkley in the NBA, Patrick Ewing. We say, man, those guys are Hall of Famers. They're great, but. And then the but is they don't have a ring.
Right.
And you, in basketball specifically, in football, look, there's 3 different phases, whatever. You can make the case that a quarterback, even though he touches the ball more, okay, there's still the defensive side, there's the special teams. In basketball, if you don't have a ring, that's a huge indictment on your career. Whether you like it or not, that's the reality of it. It may not be fair, but that's the world we live in. So, to me, that matters as much as anything. He's got to do it for his legacy. It's why LeBron did it. It's why LeBron left Cleveland, because he was tired of, at the time, Mo Williams being his second best option, and he needed to do that to win. And even then, they went to 4 straight finals, but they didn't win all 4. So nothing is guaranteed. And the reality of it doesn't feel natural, this is where I would argue that. The history of the NBA says it's natural. Go look at Kareem and Magic and Worthy and those teams, and Larry and Parrish and McHale. Those teams were put together in a number of different ways. Magic Johnson, you can go back and read this in the LA Times. I think it was 1991, 1992, somewhere in that range. He talked about, because at the time, the Lakers obviously got the first pick, but Chicago could have gotten the first pick. And he said if the Bulls would have gotten the first pick, he would have gone back to school because he wanted to play with Kareem. But no one ever talks about that, okay? And we have a situation here where that stuff has always happened. You know, the Celtics teams were built, yeah, Larry was drafted, but they traded for Parrish. They got other guys in other ways. So even the latest Boston Celtics team of Kevin Garnett, Ray Allen, and Paul Pierce, when they won a championship, that team was built differently. We kind of focus on this stuff on doing it the quote-unquote natural way. And really, if you look at the history of the NBA, Shaq was traded to the Lakers. All that stuff, all those teams that have been built that way, that have won and become dynasties, generally aren't done from within, from the draft.
Let me just say, the only rebuttal to that, George, is this. Those situations, well, now it's Eli manipulating where he goes in the draft, or John Elway, or in your case, suggesting Magic might have done that as well. There's still the draft process that dictates where you're going to go. And when Shaq being traded to the Lakers, there's still a cost benefit. Natural isn't a good word, doing it the natural way. But there's a sense of earning it, of paying for it, of paying the dues. The dues come from an organizational perspective by drafting. They come from trading away assets. And when there's a sense of free agency driving this, that players can get together and just put their pool of talents together in the best possible combination for themselves, it doesn't feel like it's built up from the organization forward. And that's the old-fashioned way, I guess.
Why?
I guess that's the old-fashioned way.
Because free agency is part of the way you
because
do the
I
roster.
honestly, because I still root for laundry, because I root for teams, because I root for cities, I root for organizations. And when you have players float around as independent free agents, and then layer on top of that they just select the best place they can play together, it just disrupts the idea of loyalty to a team.
So you're basically telling me because you're drafted, you have no choice in the matter. I mean, it's like the most anti-American thing ever, right?
Whoa.
You're drafted somewhere. You don't have this free market economy where you can choose where you want to work, and he's stuck there for the rest of his life? Like, that seems silly to me.
So real quick, because we're going back and forth on this, there's 2 different ideas you forward. One, You indict me being anti-American? Let's just address
I'm
that
just
for a minute.
It sounds anti-American.
No.
I think I blacked out.
We've completely digressed.
The draft, I agree, is anti-meritocratic. It is anti-capitalist. It is anti-free labor. Right. And I would not actually be in support of the draft and controlling where players go. But there's a difference between supporting it and liking it. I would support a complete free market. But that doesn't mean I have to like the teams where those players then go to be together to try to dominate the rest of the league.
All right, let me reel it back in. Freddie, what do you think? Should KD consider leaving OKC?
He should consider it, because this is about KD's, whether it's his legacy, but it's also about his life. If you feel you have taken the team as far as you can, where you were drafted by that team, and that's not to say Oklahoma City has not done enough. They've tried everything possible. They've changed coaches. They've changed players. They traded away James Harden. They made the choice between James Harden and Serge Ibaka because they felt that was a better fit for their basketball team. It's not like Oklahoma City hasn't tried, and it's not like Kevin Durant hasn't tried. But you know what? If you feel a situation is going to be better for you, I have never been opposed to anybody making things better from a life standpoint. And if Kevin Durant looks at Oklahoma City, whether he believes Russell Westbrook is going to leave or not going to leave, or if he believes that Russell Westbrook has ascended so much that maybe he can't deal with that. He's used to being the guy in Oklahoma City. He's been that guy for a long time. Well, now, can he share that in Oklahoma City? But does he, maybe he doesn't want to share that, and he said, well, if I'm going to do this, I'd rather go somewhere else and share with other guys where my chance to win a championship are going to be better. So, yeah, I don't think he's leaving Oklahoma City. My gut feeling tells me that he's going to stay there, that he wants to make this work. But at the same time, should he consider leaving? Absolutely, if he believes that the situation for his game, for his life, NBA and outside of it, is going to be better. And if he looks at Golden State and he says, boy, them bros over there having a whole bunch of fun, and they're winning, and we can't beat them. You know what? If that means I got to join up with them, I'm going to look a lot better with a championship joining up with them than being frustrated trying to make it work, being a Hall of Famer, and then I'm in that Charles Barkley, Patrick Ewing, Karl Malone, John Stockton class. I just wonder if his ego, if his sensitivity will be able to handle that. I still have a question.
George, one last point.
Yeah, look, I just think if he can win a championship in OKC, look, if they somehow win it this year, I don't think it's going to happen. But if they do, then he stays. I mean, I don't think there's any question he sticks it out with Russell Westbrook. But if he can't win, his legacy matters. Look, he said it in Sports Illustrated a couple of years ago. I'm tired of being number 2.
Yes.
And now he may not be number 2. He may be number 3. So I think that's an issue.
I want to make one more quick point of why it leaves a bad taste in your mouth when you see fans do this with the Heat and LeBron, or if KD did this with the Warriors, because it feels like you've taken a shortcut. Success earned through failure.
The life of a professional athlete does not last very long. You get the opportunities that you need.
Give me one more minute and I'll explain.
Okay.
And it'll seem less ridiculous, I'm sure.
59, 58.
Success earned through the process of failure and ups and downs. The Boston Red Sox winning the World Series after decades of failure felt better. It felt more earned than if there was any shortcuts taken. I understand there's free agency in baseball.
Well, I was just going to say more than half that roster wasn't a
David
Red Sox
Ortiz was
guy.
But the point is that failure in hard times made that title much sweeter. The fact that they had been down made it better. And as a fan, when you see your organization and your players suffer through the down years and ultimately win, it makes the title sweeter. I'll tell you from a fan's perspective, the one title in 2011 from the Dallas Mavericks feels much sweeter than if I had gotten Carmelo Anthony and Dwayne Wade to come join that team and won 2 or 3.
Because you're speaking from a fan's perspective.
Exactly.
Fans are going to be more invested in their teams. You're exactly right, because Red Sox fans, they talk about it all the time. I'm sick of Red Sox fans acting like baseball was invented since 2004 when they had that comeback versus the Yankees, because for the longest time, from their grandfathers, from their fathers, from their older brothers, from their sisters, from their mothers, that's all they heard about. So from a fan standpoint, that makes a lot of sense because they're more vested in their teams. We've seen plenty of fans. I mean, we were all seen the Paul Feinbaum show. We know what they look like on Monday if Alabama or Auburn has won or lost a football game, because fans are out of their minds when it comes to teams a lot of the time.
Yeah, the husband isn't being allowed back in the bedroom.
Exactly. Exactly. You know, my husband and I are not having relations because our team lost. Because fans are, not everybody, but a lot of fans are crazy. Players and teams don't think that way.
Well, I started this out and said, if I'm KD, I want to return that loyalty, return that relationship because it's valuable.
But he's not a fan.
No, but it's a reciprocal relationship.
Well, it's going to reciprocate. If you're Kevin Durant, you go and win a championship, you know there's going to be hurt feelings no matter what. Hey, I'd rather win a championship, and they're going to have hurt feelings. There isn't anything I can do about that, one way or the other, from Kevin Durant. I have to look out for what's going to be best for me, because those fans are looking out for what's best for them when it comes to being invested in their team.
Here's a real-life example here. We all came from different places to work here, right? There's a reason we came here to work, because this is the best place to work in sports, right? It's the same analogy. It's no different than Kevin Durant. If he were to leave Oklahoma City to go to Golden State, it was no different than LeBron leaving Cleveland to go to Miami. Yeah, to me, it's no different.
From a professional athlete's perspective, it's not necessarily about succeeding and failing. I think that succeeding is also being really smart and think about what's best for you. And just to clarify something, Shaq signed with the Lakers as a free agent, and he was traded to the Heat from the Lakers. So we were just talking about that. So we'll have more NBA to talk about later, including a juicy debate on whether the beard, James Harden, fresh off his 8th 40-point game of the season, is overrated or not. And we're not talking about just his beard. So that's our Twitter poll of the day. So hit us up on that and let us know what you think. So coming Robert Griffin III, the 2012 Rookie of the Year, didn't play a single snap last season after the Redskins decided to go with Kirk Cousins. And although this doesn't come as a surprise, team president Bruce Allen solidified RG3's fate in an interview with San Diego's Dan Silio's show. Take a listen.
I see Robert getting an opportunity with another team. I think we've heard from some teams that are interested, and I think he's going to have a choice of a couple teams that will let him excel in the future. Robert has handled himself as a professional. When we first drafted him all the way through, he's been a good teammate. His teammates like him, his coaches like him, and he does have some special talents, and we wish him well.
So just this morning, RG3 tweeted, "Just work hard and watch God work it all out. Hashtag know your why." So guys, if you were a GM for a team, would you take a chance on RG3? Freddie?
Sure. I don't think it's a lose situation if you do, because, and to Bruce Allen's point, he made a great point about RG3 was a great teammate last year. That's really the first time we've heard that since year one, when he had the highest rookie quarterback rating in the history of the National Football League. It could have been very easy for him to have been that anonymous source quoting saying RG3 is fed up. You didn't hear any of that with Washington last year. It was as if he was resigned to his fate, thinking, okay, I'm not going to be the guy here. Jay Gruden has made his decision. I'm going to apply my trade somewhere else. I'm going to have to, but I'm not going to make it worse for me by being a cancer, being a malcontent in the clubhouse. I'm not going to do that because my job is on the line here. My lifeline's on the line here in the National Football League. So if you're a general manager, of course you have to know what you're getting, because as mercurial as he can be, that athleticism has gotten him in a lot of trouble in terms of trying to be Superman and making every play. He's got to be better at that from the quarterback position, knowing when to try to make that play and when not to make that play. So if you're a general manager, head coach, you're going to know within the first 5 minutes when you talk to this guy if I should sign up or not sign up, because there'll be some clues there. It'll be like a combine interview with RG3. When you bring him in and you vet him out, you say, okay, this guy fooled everybody. I'm not going to be fooled by him. But it's a no-lose to me, because you bring him in, you want to pay him a lot of money, and if it works out, fantastic. It's a second act. It's a great second act. If it doesn't work out, you're not paying this guy $25 million, and it's strangling your team in terms of a salary cap situation. So to me, I don't think it's a no-lose situation if you're a GM to bring him in, see what's what. If it doesn't work out, you move on to somebody else.
Interesting. So you don't think it's a no-lose situation?
Oh, I think there's a lose situation to it. Definitely. There are situations where Robert Griffin III could come in and be a massive distraction. I'll give you one quick example, the Dallas Cowboys. I think there's a definite losing scenario in that potential relationship. Look, if I were a GM, I would want to invest in Robert Griffin III. He's phenomenally talented. The value investor in me would say, I want to buy low to this amazing talent. And hopefully reap an incredible upside that we saw at least his first year in the league. Sort of like going to the lost and found and finding a diamond ring. That's what I would like to think I was capable of doing. That being said, it depends on who the GM is. If Robert Griffin III is going to be that diamond ring, it's got to be in the right place, in the right system. I think he was given pretty much every chance to succeed in Washington. He got to run a spread option the first year. He was phenomenally successful. He wanted to be a pocket passer. His dad said he wanted to be a pocket passer. They tried to ease him into that role and then accelerated it into the second year and found out he can't read defenses. He can't make progressions. He can't sometimes execute a 3 or 5 step drop. So he wasn't ready for that. So if you have a system, you got to ask yourself, which one can Robert Griffin III step into or even learn under for a couple years and thrive in? And to me, there's only a handful of places where that's possibly true. I think we all want to put him on the Texans because they're an almost their team. And Bill O'Brien has mentored quarterbacks, but I don't know that he's ever succeeded with a read option quarterback. I don't know that he's ever succeeded with the kind of talent that Robert Griffin III has. I'll tell you the one place that has, that's Kansas City. Andy Reid has done it. He's done it with Donovan McNabb. He's done it with Michael Vick. He's done it now with Alex Smith. Robert Griffin could go into Kansas City, sit behind Alex Smith for a couple years, be tutored under Andy Reid, and if I'm the GM there, yes, it makes sense. Much lower proposition. But a place like Dallas, it could be a big, big distraction.
George?
I agree and disagree. Okay, I agree with you on Dallas. I think that could have been a dumpster fire just because of just all the different fireworks, all the different personalities, the fact that he would be a distraction there because if Tony has one bad game, he gets hurt, you throw in RG3, he's not ready. The coaches obviously aren't comfortable with him as a quarterback in that system, but we know the owner tends to trump things there. So occasionally he tends to listen to his guys. Maybe in this case he will. I don't agree with the Kansas City analogy only because of this. I do think it makes sense, but I don't think the athlete in this case, in RG3's case, doesn't think that way. He thinks, where do I go where I can start right away? Now. And the Texans are one of them. The Rams are another one. Maybe the Niners are another one because Chip Kelly's there, and they don't even know what's going to happen with Kaepernick there. So I think those are the type of teams he looks at. I do think the cost matters here. It's a total buy low situation. There's not a ton of risk for the team. Because what are you going to pay him? Maybe a couple $1 million tops?
Incentive-laden contract.
Absolutely. But with RG3, there is some risk. Do you want to go to a place where you can be perceived as a distraction, where you don't necessarily feel like the coaches are behind you? We've seen these situations where owners have gotten behind quarterbacks particularly, whether it's, Dallas is not the quarterback situation, but he's gotten behind other players. But in Cleveland, right, Jimmy Haslam and Johnny Manziel and trying to force the square peg in the round hole. You don't want that of your RG3. You want to try to avoid those type of organizations. You want to go somewhere where you think the coach will believe in you, will put you in the right position to succeed, and then you also have an opportunity to start. So honestly, of all those options, as crazy as this sounds, I think the Niners may make the most sense because of Chip Kelly, because he's had some success with the read option type quarterbacks. That's the guy I would look at for an opportunity to start right away.
Okay, so if you were George Sedano, the GM, would you pick him up?
Yeah, I would let him, Kaepernick, all those guys battle it out.
Of the Niners, you're GM of the Niners.
Yeah.
But what about, George, if you're the GM of the Texans? Then do you go for it? See, the argument I'm making is it has to fit the system. He fits the system in San Francisco.
Yeah.
There, it's the debate between Kaepernick and RG3.
Right.
But the system fits. The debate for GMs is, can Robert Griffin III survive or thrive in any system? And I think the answer is no. So you have to look at your coach and your system and say, can he thrive here? And I don't know that a place like Houston, the answer is yes.
That's why I think it is yes in Houston, because he got to the playoffs last year, Brian Hoyer's his quarterback. And that guy's nowhere near the ability of RG3. If he can do that with that guy that completely unraveled in that playoff game with Kansas City, and it's on RG3. RG3 has to be better at taking criticism. And Bill O'Brien, as we've seen on Hard Knocks, he will give it to you straight with no chaser. So RG3, whatever situation he goes to, Will and George and Prim, he can't be that sensitive RG3. He's got to stay off Twitter, stay off Facebook, stay off social media. The minute he involves himself in that as a dude, that is idiotic, because that is a battle you can't win, trying to argue with people, making their name off of you. RG3 has got to put all that aside and say, okay, Bill O'Brien can help me, but I have to be receptive to his help. He can't go out there and be stubborn that we saw plenty of times with the Washington Redskins. So he was able to help himself in terms of public relations by not being a distraction last year. But this is on RG3 to go out there and say, okay, I know that that's out there. How am I going to change that? It can't be so much on the GM and the team. It has to be on him that he has to learn that position. And if he can't, that's not a Bill O'Brien problem. That still becomes an RG3 problem.
Look, here's the thing. If he wants to become a pocket passer, and that's truly what he wants to be, then he should go to Bill O'Brien and say, or his agent should go to Bill O'Brien and say, hey, this is what Robert wants. He wants to learn under you. You've coached some of the best. You coached Tom Brady. He wants to learn under you. Now, that doesn't mean he gets a starting job right away.
Right.
Now, and maybe you buy low on something like that where you have to make him work into being that guy. But if you want an automatic fit, then Chip Kelly's the answer. But here's the thing. RG3 may not want that. RG3 may not want to have his body take that type of punishment in that particular offense with Chip Kelly.
Well, everything we've seen suggests Robert Griffin, he wants to be a pocket passer.
Right.
That's everything we've seen. So he might want to go to Houston. But I think with the question we keep dancing around is, wherever he wants to go, if you run that team, do you want him? And if you're right that he wants to start next year, and you're the Houston Texans GM, you have to ask yourself, okay, he says he wants to be a pocket passer, but he still needs to learn. O'Brien can teach him, but he still needs to learn. That means he doesn't start next year. We have an inherent tension.
Well, he's not the day one starter more than likely if he goes to the Houston Texans.
That's interesting that you guys say that. Does he really want to be a pocket passer? And we haven't really touched on his health because he's a big liability. He's not the QB that we saw in 2012, and he had to change his game.
Yeah, because he's not Cam Newton.
To maintain that health, but
he wasn't very good when he did that.
Right, exactly. Cam Newton. People forget when Cam Newton first got to the NFL. You look at his stats; he tore apart the league. Over 4,000 yards passing. He was doing, and people say, well, that guy from Auburn, that spread option guy, can't succeed. He's one of the few. RG3 was able to have those kind of concepts, and if you're a smart coach, you'll have enough of them there, but not to try to put him in harm's way, because that's going to be idiotic, because you've seen his history trying to have that spread option field with him, trying to be that total athlete. That's why I think from a Bill O'Brien standpoint, it makes sense, because Bill O'Brien, people forget, he put Matt McGloin in the NFL. I know it's a backup, but no one's talking about Matt McGloin being in the NFL when Bill O'Brien got to Penn State. He helped get that guy a job in the National Football League. If he can do that with Matt McGloin, now he has a talented guy that just needs the right kind of coaching, and Robert Griffin III has to be receptive to that coaching. If both of those factors can happen, that could be a really good situation in Houston.
He is also a guy who pulled the trigger on his starting quarterback 3 quarters into the first game and then named Ryan Mallett the starting QB.
Based on Brian Hoyer, I don't blame him.
We're talking basically of RG3 in this fashion. If he goes to Houston, he's in essence a project, which is kind of wild to think when you think about where he was just a couple of years ago.
He's a project that doesn't start right away, and as a GM, you got to ask, is he committed to being that project?
Sure.
He wants to play right away. If you're right, George, he wants to play right away. He needs to go to San Francisco.
Right, that makes the most sense. Yeah.
All right, well, let's move on. It is a tradition that's been going on for 30-plus years, but imagine being asked in an interview if you thought your mother was attractive. That's very interesting. Is the NFL Scouting Combine overrated altogether? We will discuss that next. It is a neat market for scouts, the NFL Scouting Combine. It's a tradition that's been going on since 1982, where draft prospects go to show off their skills and where they get asked some really bizarre questions, at least these days. Former NFL defensive end Austin Lane said he's been asked things like if he thought his mother was attractive and if he had to murder someone, would he use a gun or a knife? Not exactly the most useful of questions. I don't think you guys have been asked that before during an interview, at least I hope not. So the question we pose is the NFL Combine overrated? Will?
No, I think it's actually become fashionable. It's become cool to say the NFL Combine is so dumb. It's the underwear Olympics. These questions are ridiculous. I think if it was so dumb and overrated, you probably wouldn't have 32 teams show up. Maybe one would say, we're going to sit this out. I don't really see the value. There's definite value in everything, including those questions you read, Prim. They, on their surface, seem like stupid questions because maybe you or you guys would answer them correctly. But I'll promise you this, somebody's not. They wouldn't ask you this question. If you could murder somebody and get away with it, would you? They wouldn't ask that question if 100% of the respondents said, no, of course I wouldn't. Somebody's saying yes. They're using that question to weed out people that they should not draft. They want to see how you respond. They want to see what kind of person you are. They want to see how intelligent you are. This all has value. And then we talk about things like the 40 and how applicable that is to what happens on the field or the broad jump. I'll just say this. For every Mike Mamula, the famous Philadelphia Eagles draftee who knocked the Wonderlic out of the park and bench pressed all day, and then, of course, wasn't much of a player.
Couldn't play dead.
Right. And for every one of those, there is a Dontari Poe who ran the 40 in some incredible time at 340 pounds. Or Byron Jones, who sets the record for a broad jump. And that actually shows these guys are amazing athletes, bumped their draft status up, and then they were therefore appropriately valued. Both have become great players. Before the Combine, people weren't valuing those guys as highly. The idea of the draft ultimately is that every guy would be appropriately valued. Does the Combine help you in getting there? Yes on some guys, no on some guys. But I think we've kind of gotten to this point where we like to dismiss it as, you know, just read the tape or just look at the tape and see how guys play on the field, which of course you should. But the Combine has value as well, including these seemingly ridiculous questions.
Yeah, I disagree. I think the Combine is absolutely, utterly ridiculous. I mean, it's gotten to the point where we've got Jeff Ireland a couple of years ago asking Des Bryant if his mom was a hooker or whatever it was. Like, I don't see the value in any of that. I don't see where that's going to make or break a decision you're going to have on a guy. First of all, let's start here. These scouts that are asking these questions, my guess is most of them not shrinks. So let's start with that. How are they evaluating them? All right, that's number one. Number two, okay? A lot of the exercises that they do in the combine are not football exercises. So how does that translate to the field? And number three, I've had these conversations with Mark Dominic, Phil Savage, all these front office guys we've had here, and I've specifically asked them, you've drafted guys in this league, you've been a general manager, how much does the combine matter? Give me a percentage. Most of them say, maybe 10%. So what are we really doing here, other than it's just a copycat league, and it's really an opportunity at the combine for owners to get together, for GMs to get together, to talk about trades, to talk to agents about free agents. The guys are there, certainly. The draft matters, and I think that's part of it. But there's more things that go on at the combine other than just the guys who are working out.
This is the same NFL making characterizations, the same NFL that have had loads of players that have run afoul of the law when they've been inside and outside the National Football League. So you are telling me, by having a combine that's been around since 1982, that this has to be an ultimate part of the end-all, the be-all when it comes to where a player is going to go or if a player is not going to be drafted. This is the same National Football League that has a lot of trust issues with the general public out there based on a lot of decisions that they have made when it has come to players and anything regarding the National Football League. To George's point about these scouts, how many of these scouts are in the green room when it's time to draft a guy?
I've actually heard some stories that the scouts don't have that much say, that the GMs aren't listening to the scouts.
Right. You can't con anybody once you're out there on the floor. And what I mean by that is, if you can play, it's going to show early. If you can't play, we know the draft is an inexact science. You're not going to hit on everybody. You're not going to miss on everybody. Completely understand that. You may look at a guy and think he's the greatest person in the world. Then all of a sudden, you have an Aaron Hernandez with the New England Patriots. And how did that work out for him in the New England Patriots? So if you're going to tell me that the combine is that important, it's not that important. You're making an evaluation on a person that you hope, that you're wishing, that you're praying is going to work out, but you still don't know. But when anybody tries to say that the combine is as important to drafting a player, they are living in fantasy land if they continue to believe that foolishness and that nonsense. I think they throw these questions at players just to see if they can trip them up. Well, if you're trying to trip up guys now at the combine, what does that say about you as an organization? It tells me that your organization does not believe in its ability to find the right guys consistently time and time again, and you use a combine as an excuse. Well, that's why we don't want to draft this player. This guy said he would murder people based on the answer to the question. It's ridiculous that that's used as an evaluation if a guy can play or he can't play. It's hard enough to draft guys as it is. Now you're adding this to the mix, and then you're placing a lot of value on this. Guys do that. It's ridiculous.
Drafting is an inexact science to begin with, okay? So let's just start with that. So they're just trying to create layers of information for themselves to help the evaluation process. And in essence, really what they're doing is creating clutter, because I don't think any of this really matters when it comes to playing on the field.
Yeah,
and the GMs themselves will tell you that the tape is what matters the most.
Right. Well, I don't understand how asking briefs or boxers helps. How does that
Well, with all due respect to all three of you, for this matter, whose intelligence I grant, and I just don't grant you the intelligence of being smarter than, every single person working in every organization of the NFL.
Including the ones that work here?
Invest their time in it. And who invest their time. You're right, George. These guys aren't shrinks. Doesn't take a shrink to figure out if a guy says, yes, I'd murder somebody if I could get away with it. Doesn't need to be drafted to your team.
Boxers or briefs is a question, legitimate question.
Do you find your mother attractive?
Right. How about when Blake Bortles was asked, hey, can you bring your girlfriend to dinner?
Yeah.
Like, what the hell does that mean?
That had a lot to do with his quarterback.
Without having to answer for every single question that's asked, all I would tell you is that I don't think these questions would be asked if they weren't providing some value to the teams asking them. If you're asking a question that 300 and some odd players at the combine answer the same way, no matter how obvious, which you think, by the way, on the murder question, everybody would answer the same way, the question would be discarded. You know why? It wouldn't differentiate players whatsoever. It wouldn't trip people up. It wouldn't weed anybody out. The point is, this is about the answers, not the questions.
I'm not interested.
The point isn't whether or not these questions are ridiculous. The point is how ridiculous the answers are.
The answer, when Cam Newton was asked some ridiculous question, right? He said, I don't know how that's relevant to what I'm going to do to play quarterback. And then all of a sudden the knock on him was, oh, look at that. You know what? He doesn't follow direction. All of a sudden he rebels against authority. I mean, come on, man. Any normal person will look at the person asking that question and just be like, Are you stupid? Are you ridiculous? What the hell is wrong with you? So he has that reaction, and then he's looked at as a character flaw.
But now you're judging exactly how they use the information. What I'm defending is the gathering of the information. You're indicting the entire process, from the combine to the questionnaire. And what I'm telling you is both of which are providing valuable information to these organizations, or, quite honestly, they wouldn't waste their time with it. George, if they want to get together over cocktails and discuss trades, they can do it without having to ask these questions.
But they do it anyway,
right.
And they use the combine as this front that they're getting together. Oh, we have evaluations. I've seen plenty of combines where these guys not even looking at the players on the field. And that's what they're there for.
So to
For the players on the field.
There have been general managers that fall asleep in the
basically
stands.
nodding off, and I'm thinking, that's what I'm paying this guy for. I can pay him to sleep.
I need you to get in a room with 300 diverse guys and ask them the most ridiculous question you can come up with. And you can go into it, by the way, with the mindset, this is so absurd and a waste of time. This is so silly and insulting, actually, to those I'm about to ask the question to. I'll give you all that. And then I want you to get in the room, and I want you ask that absurd question to 350 diverse guys. And at the end of that process, I'm going to bet you, I'll bet you dollars to donuts, the answers you get will affect the way you think of those 350 guys.
I'd rather ask a person, what can you do for me to make my company better, instead of, is your mother attractive, and then using that as a basis.
So to Freddie and George, if you could change it, or if you could completely do away with it, what would you do with the combine?
I think the interview process needs to be it needs to be individualized. How about that? You look at the kid's resume, you talk to the coaches, you talk to the high school coaches, the college coaches, the teammates, you find out what you want. I'm not opposed to gathering information, Will. I'm telling you, gather all the information that makes sense, that's relevant to your decision. Boxers or briefs is not relevant to your decision. Bring your girlfriend to dinner is not relevant to your decision. Talk to the coaches. Find out if he did something in school. He skipped a class. He dropped a class or something.
Let me give you an example.
Find out why. That makes more sense if you're looking for a...
To be quite honest, George, you're just thinking it as though you were the one being asked the question. So let me give you an example.
No, I'm thinking about it as someone who's the executive, because I need it to be relevant to what I'm doing.
How about this, George? Boxers are brief, okay? And the defensive end you're thinking about drafting...
Boxer briefs, actually.
And the defensive end, you're thinking about drafting says, you know what, Mr. Sedano, I don't wear underwear. In fact, I never do. As often as possible, I try to never wear underwear, including, by the way, when I go to the grocery store. That's really how I like to roll.
Cool.
Would you make a note?
No,
Would you
it wouldn't matter.
That's absurd, because the minute he's Joseph Randall stealing underwear at the department store, you care.
I don't think Joseph Randall answered the question if boxers or briefs had anything to do with him being a knucklehead.
Like, come on.
He had 5 arrests in 17 months. It had nothing to do if he was boxer, briefs, or commando.
You don't
from
know
that
what
standpoint.
the answers are. You're only judging the question based on how you'd answer it. You have no idea what the answers are.
I'm not going to ask a question of a guy that is not relevant to what he's going to bring to me on a football field or off a football field. But you want to gather, the NFL gathers so much intel. This is the best they can do with these kind of combine questions, with all the intel and all the guys that they have. And the NFL has plenty of private detectives finding out about players and coaches and people. You're trying to tell me, with all the people that you have gathering intel, boxer briefs is what you're coming up with?
The biggest unknown on drafting a guy is what's between his ears. That's the biggest unknown on everything. And
but there's a way you can ask those questions, Will. But there's a way you can ask those questions that will find out what's relevant to helping out your football team, or what kind of person he is. You can go into someone's history and find out. The NFL does it all the time.
There's a way to gather information and make it relevant to the process, and it just feels like that's not the case.
That's not the case to me.
Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. There have been a ton of players who went to the combine and they slipped through and went undrafted. Guys like Kurt Warner, Antonio Gates, James Harrison, John Randall.
But sometimes
Antonio Brown.
But sometimes
Brady is a 6th rounder.
But as you said, sometimes it works. It's not perfection I'm defending.
Those guys weren't
it's
at the
usefulness.
Yeah, we know you're not defending perfection, but that usefulness thing,
All right. Boxer briefs. Oh, my goodness. All right, coming up.
Tells you a lot about a man.
Is it time to move on from Tony Romo and Big D? Should they draft a QB? Sign a veteran? The guys will discuss after the break. Tony Romo has yet to make a decision on surgery for his left collarbone, but the Dallas Morning News reports that the Cowboys star QB is leaning towards having surgery to guard against another collarbone injury. As we saw last year, it's pretty clear that this team needs him. Last season, they were 3-1 with him and 1-9 without him, but Romo is on the cusp of turning 36 years old, and he's had his fair share of injuries over the last several seasons. So the question we pose, is it time for the Cowboys to move on from Romo? Freddie? Going to go to you.
You guys have actually felt that pain, so you guys should be able to
Two
handle it.
Cowboys
both Cowboys fans.
fans.
Yeah.
I didn't know that till this morning.
Yes. Yeah.
So
we had that
we
information.
do feel this pain.
We also learned about ranch, third-degree black belt, and Jeopardy. So we learned that as well. I thought last year they should have had a better plan in place, because I thought the Cowboys, not saying they were fooled by the season he had in 2014. He had one of the all-time great seasons that people don't talk about at the quarterback position, where he was a legit MVP candidate. 30 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, completed close to 70% of his passes. I think the Cowboys looked at that and said, hey, his injury past is gone. That's in the past now. He's going to be fine. You are an injury away from going from yay to yuck in this league, especially the quarterback position. And the Cowboys should have figured that out and known they had a better plan in place. At 36 years of age, if you're not thinking about your future without Tony Romo, you are fooling yourself. You're the Dallas Cowboys. Kellen Moore, nice guy, not the answer if Romo goes down again with an injury. We know how the Matt Castle experiment ended everywhere. It blew up in their faces. So if you're Dallas, I'm not saying they should move on from Tony Romo, but you have to be more cognizant than ever before about making sure, man, we got to have a better plan in place, because plan A last year, 3-1 and 1-9 without him, and it just affected everybody. Des Bryant, Jason Witt, even the defense, which was pretty good considering they didn't have the playmaking consistency and turning the ball over like they had the year before. So I don't know if they should move on from Tony Romo right now, but there should be a plan in place that if he gets injured, and I think the likelihood is there that it's going to happen again, to make sure you have a better backup plan instead of the backup plan you had last year that you were hoping you wouldn't have to deal with. But with his injury history from the past, you had to realize that was going to be something that was going to be more of a certainty, even though it did not happen in 2014, excuse me.
You're right.
All you, buddy. You've felt that pain.
The
Go ahead.
Cowboys.
You're right. I did. And I'll tell you something, George. I felt that pain before this year. Now, all due respect to Freddie, I don't know how you can be a bigger Cowboy fan than I am. And
I don't doubt that. I don't. You grew up in Texas.
Not that it's a competition.
No, but I'm with you. I feel you. You got me on that.
And on top of that,
And you worked on a ranch.
I'm a Romo
And you
fan.
worked on the ranch.
I did. And on top of that, I'm a Romo fan, who I think has been unfairly maligned and underrated through his entire career.
question.
And the numbers back me up. Why that pain is longer than a year ago, George, is I remember this. Quincy Carter.
Oof.
Chad Hutchison,
Oh.
Drew Henson.
Come on now.
I remember when Troy Aikman prematurely retired because of concussions, and the Cowboys had no plan. And they were in the wilderness searching for a quarterback for years, until, honestly, they got so lucky, or maybe had incredible scouting, to find an undrafted quarterback from Eastern Illinois. I don't think that can happen again. The likelihood of finding an undrafted quarterback that can be a franchise guy like Tony Romo is so low. So here's why you invest in Tony Romo's replacement this year with the number 4 pick. And it has nothing to do with Romo, or very little, because I think he has 3-4 good years left. It's that fragile collarbone that he's talking about putting a plate on, that now they're talking about shaving off to make shorter so it's less fragile.
Ouch.
But on top of that, on top of the risk, is how many times can the Cowboys count on having the number 4 pick in the draft? You can make fun of me and say, it's going to be pretty often, Will, but I actually think it's not going to be often. And if you think Carson Wentz or Jared Goff or perhaps Paxton Lynch are Andrew Luck, Mike Mayock thinks that Carson Wentz is Andrew Luck. If you think that, you have to make that pick. It sets your franchise up for the next 15 years. If he's a franchise quarterback, he learns under Romo, ideally for 3 years. He's got a year or 2 left on his rookie contract. If it doesn't go well and Romo gets hurt, he steps in right away and starts learning. You have to make that pick. I just want to say, it's easy for all of us to go, yes, Cowboys, invest.
Right.
There's always a cost. Sure. And the cost is this. It's Joey Bosa, perhaps. Defensive end. Ohio State. Cowboys need a defensive end really badly. It's Jalen Ramsey. Many are saying one of the best cornerbacks/safeties to come out in a decade.
You can play.
And the Cowboys need that position. So you're sacrificing a probable starter, even though rookie, on defense next year, for a guy that's going to sit for 3 years. I just think, though, ultimately, you're not in this position very often. You got to take it.
So let me ask the question again. Is it time for the Cowboys to move on from Romo?
Move on in getting the replacement, but Romo is your quarterback for the next 3 years.
Okay.
Move on. How about this? Emotionally. Be prepared for the
Slowly
non-Romo
but surely
days.
emotionally. Okay.
Yeah, look, I think it's no different than what Green Bay did with Aaron Rodgers and Brett Favre. I think at a certain point you have to realize, okay, the biggest predictor of future injuries are past injuries. And that's the case with Tony Romo. He's got a back injury, right, a couple years ago. He's got the shoulder injury. So now he's starting to get up in age, and the body's starting to kind of catch up on him. So you have to invest in someone. And it's not someone that needs to start right away, which is a luxury in this league. The one thing in this league that we've gotten away from is that we don't groom guys very much. And whether you look at, and you have to go back a while, certainly, but Aaron is the most recent example of a guy, I think, that made a huge impact early because he was able to kind of groom into the role. You can go back further. Even a guy like Carson Palmer sat a year behind John Kitna. Eli sat for 8 games. McNabb sat for 8 games. Steve McNair, may he rest in peace, sat for a couple of years.
So Chris Chandler.
That was kind of the norm in the NFL. And I think that would be the most proactive thing that the Cowboys could do in this situation is say, hey, let's anoint the guy, let's find the guy, and let's put him in there, and let's let him learn from Tony. And maybe Tony takes the Brett Favre approach and says, I'm not paid to be a mentor. That's not what I'm doing. But, okay, then it's the coach's job to get that guy ready if and when Tony goes down. And certainly moving forward, you've got your succession plan in place. I agree wholeheartedly with Will and Freddie.
And to both of their points, you think about it, the NFL has been kind of ruined because we saw how Andrew Luck played well early. RG3 his first year. Cam Newton.
Russell Wilson.
Even Ben Roethlisberger.
Ben Roethlisberger stepped in, got the Steelers in the AFC Championship game. The NFL has been seduced by, okay, if we're drafting a guy number 4 or number 2, he's got to start right away. Instead of taking the time to be patient, because especially at that position, to me, the quarterback position, the most important position in sports. If you have a great quarterback, everything's better. You have a terrible quarterback, you're the Cleveland Browns, who have been in quarterback purgatory since they got back in the NFL since 1999. So owners have seen that and say, okay, well, if it worked for them, why can't we get that guy? And they have that in their mind that if we're drafting a quarterback in the first round, we expect that guy not only to start right away, but we think we got the next Andrew Luck or the next RG3. It's gotten to a point now that owners and GMs have that in their mind that it really has skewed how they look at quarterbacks now when they get drafted in the first round.
Well, part of the reason, Freddie, for that is that they can think that way again.
Right.
They can think about grooming. Before the rookie salary cap ceiling, you had to spend a ton of money on Sam Bradford. And if you had that much money, you had that much money tied up in Sam Bradford, you got to put him on the field. You got to play him. You can't invest in having 2 quarterbacks on the roster like Tony Romo and Jared Goff or Tony Romo and Carson Wentz. Now, because those salaries are capped, you can do that again. It doesn't kill you to have 2 high investments at the quarterback
position. But they still don't do it, though. That's what I'm saying.
You're right.
They still don't do it.
Most teams don't.
Most teams don't do it. You're right. It should be that way.
And I think partially that's because many teams think like the Cowboys. We're only a player or 2 away.
Absolutely.
We can be back to being contenders. A guy sitting on the bench doesn't help us become a contender again. A guy like Jalen Ramsey, he does put us perhaps back into that playoff picture, into the championship game. That's the real cost. And as a fan, I'll tell you, I do think the Cowboys are closer. They're closer to the Super Bowl than they are to 4-12. So you're enticed by the idea of saying, let me get this 1 in a million or this world-class defensive back, because that could really make me better next year.
Here's the answer. Trade down and get the next best quarterback, get another pick, and then you get 2 guys.
Yes, takes 2 to tango.
Yes,
trade
down. Trade the 4th pick.
Somebody will trade it at that pick.
Niners and Rams at, what is it, 7 and 11?
Yeah, absolutely.
Try to trade down and try to get another pick back.
I tell you, the one thing that worries me about Tony Romo is just his health, because, I mean, and he did this behind one of the best offensive lines in the league, and he still keeps getting banged up. But there is something to be said, I think, about finding somebody who's young, maybe drafting a guy, and letting him be mentored by a veteran like Tony Romo. You look at Tyrod Taylor with the Bills, and he sat behind Joe Flacco with the Ravens for 4 years, and it paid off for him.
And it's different than the RG3 debate we had earlier. A rookie who has no public expectations layered on him, or very little, isn't the distraction that bringing in RG3 is. The analysis could work for RG3. Come in, learn under Tony Romo. The problem is he's not an unknown rookie. He's RG3.
By the way, isn't anything really a distraction over there in Dallas, though? When it comes
no matter what.
No matter what it is.
All this being said, by the way, the crowd chants for Carson Wentz in Game 9.
That'll be a distraction through no fault of his own. Right. Just because he's Carson Wentz being drafted.
Well, Jerry will say something ridiculous, right? That's just the way it is. You know,
that is
that'll spark
definitely
something.
the way it is.
This player out there has the opportunity
opportunity to make us just better immediately. You're going to hear that. Jerry
That's
Jones.
pretty poor.
Yeah,
I mean, I got to call you on that invitation.
You know what? He's been pretty poor imitating a GM for a while with the Dallas Cowboys. And like I'm not the only one that felt that way.
And so with that, we've talked about Jerry Jones. We've talked about Tony Romo. Let's talk about Tim Tebow. It is First Take, right? So up next, is Tim Tebow still in the hearts of Americans?
Get Skip on the phone.
Yeah, we should, definitely. He was
Holy
voted
cow.
pretty high on a recent poll of favorite QBs. Are the guys surprised? We'll debate after this. It's Tebow time. Well, Monday marked the 5-year anniversary of the blockbuster trade that sent Carmelo Anthony to the Big Apple. And it's safe to say he expected way more during his time in New York. The Knicks have dropped 12 of their last 14. And since Melo arrived in 2011, the Knicks have a mediocre 189 and 230 record. The 12-year veteran had this to say this week to reporters. It's been tough. It's challenging. It's challenging to kind of stay strong and positive through all this. When you look at it, how many different coaches? 4 different coaches, a lot of different players. I mean, that's a lot to go through. Regardless of the record, just losing, it is hard to accept that. You can't be satisfied with losing basketball games. So Carmelo, he won't be a free agent until the summer of 2019, and he does have a no-trade clause. So where is the best fit for Melo? I'm going to go to the NBA guy, George.
Clearly, it's not New York. But look, he can complain about this all he wants. This is all his own doing. He chose to sign there. He chose to go back to New York. And whether it was for the extra year and the extra security and extra money or the legacy of being an all-time Knick, he chose that. And now he's upset by it and annoyed by the timeline of the Knicks and it not being up to speed with where he wants to be as far as trying to win a championship. Clearly he wants to win a championship, but clearly he also didn't think this through when making his decision a while back. So here's the deal. If you're Carmelo Anthony, there are a couple of things you have to think about. Number one, obviously you have to waive your no-trade clause. Number two, who are those teams that he would waive his no-trade clause to? It's pure speculation on my part, just a guess. Off the top of my head, Clippers, Bulls, Miami, maybe Houston, but that's pretty much it. So there's those 3 or 4 teams that he would do it for. Now, on those teams, would he be willing to take a secondary role? It doesn't seem like that's the case. I've actually had this conversation with Ian O'Connor from ESPN.com. He's a longtime New York writer, and he basically said to me that when Carmelo was asked that, he kind of looked at people with the side eye like, what? What are you talking about? And that's going to be part of it. You have to be willing to sacrifice. We were talking earlier about Kevin Durant and LeBron and all those guys. They made sacrifices. Like Durant would certainly have to make some concessions if he went to the Warriors. He makes them now with Russell Westbrook. LeBron made those with Wade and Bosh. He's trying to make those with Kyrie and Love. That's part of the deal. So if he's willing to do that, maybe the Clippers make some sense. He's very close to Chris Paul. Miami makes some sense. He's very close to Dwayne Wade. And in those places, he may not be the number 1, but he could be the 1A or the 2. And if he goes to one of those places, I think he can flourish potentially in that role. As the number 1 guy, I just don't see it at this stage of his career. And they need to take advantage of this now because his value is only going to get worse as they move forward, and you never get dollar for dollar on these superstar deals. It's very rare that that's the case. So this is the offseason. If you're going to move him, you got to convince him to move now.
We talked about this morning. On a championship contender, a championship team, you're constructing it. Where on your pecking order would you expect Carmelo Anthony to be? Your top player?
No.
Second player?
Maybe.
Third player?
Second, I bet.
Probably.
Okay, so second or third player. Next question. Is Carmelo Anthony willing to be a second or third player on your team? You just suggested probably not.
Doesn't seem
so
like.
The mathematical equation is Carmelo Anthony does not belong on a championship team. There is not a championship team where Carmelo Anthony is on that team. That's the simple math of the debate. Now, maybe Carmelo changes his attitude, changes his approach to the game. But that being said, he can still be the top player on a good team. I looked at this after our debate this morning, George. A team, and you laid out the teams that he'd be willing to go to, but let's set that aside for a minute. How about just from the team's perspective? Would you be willing to take on Carmelo? A team like Dallas, I agree on Miami. A team like Dallas, maybe Boston, you could still be the number 1 guy. There's a good supporting cast in Dirk, in Chandler Parsons. That elevates you from like a 5-6 seed first-round exit into possibly a 3rd seed, 4th seed, second-round playoff team, which, quite honestly, that's Carmelo's peak. That's what it was when he's with the Nuggets. That's what he is. He's the #1 player on a team that goes out in the second round of the playoffs. That's what he's been. I would suggest that's what he's always going to be. If you want him to be more, you're asking him to be somebody other than Carmelo Anthony. You're asking him to be the second or third player on a team that can actually win the championship, and he can't be that guy. Or he hasn't shown yet that he can be that guy.
He can only be that guy on an Olympic team because you have a galaxy of stars. And he can shoot the basketball. We had that one game in the Olympics. It seemed like every shot he put up, he was just knocking them down. But that's an Olympic team, an Olympic exhibition situation compared to the rigors of the NBA. To George's point, he wanted this. You know what, Carmelo? Your best fit is New York. You got to find a way to make this work. Now, I'll give him credit this year. He's trying to play through the knee injury. He has played through it. When he's been out, the Knicks have not won a game without him. We know it as they're constructed. And I told Knicks fans this. Oh, we're going to make the playoffs. You're a 35, 40-win team at best. They're proving my point right now because the pieces that they have, it's still a work in progress. He's been a better rebounder. He has not been an unwilling defender, as unwilling of a defender we've seen in recent years, although it's easy to go from 0 to 1 when it comes to playing defense in the NBA when you're Carmelo Anthony. But you wanted to make this work. You decided that whatever bill of goods Phil Jackson sold you, that you were convinced. Yeah, money played a big part. 5 years, $124 million, you got the max contract. So, yeah, the money was the main thing. And staying in New York with your family because your family didn't want to leave New York, fine. Then the best fit for you is New York because now you have to make it work. I don't want to hear any excuses. And I'm a Carmelo Anthony fan, but I call it as I see it. If you're going to be that guy, then what do you do? What are you going to have to do to be willing to change that perception or change for the betterment of your basketball team? If you're not able to do that, then you know what? You get what you deserve because this is what you wanted. That's why you pushed your way out of Denver, and that's why you re-signed with New York. There are better opportunities out there because I know if I was in that situation and I'm being wined and dined by Chicago or Houston or Dallas, there's no way I'm going back to New York. I can get that kind of money with the NBA salary cap going up soon anyway to $92 million potentially next year and north of $110 million after that. I would have gotten my money and been in a better position. He decided to come back because he said, I want to win a championship here, and I want to be the lead guy to do it. Fine. Then New York is the best fit for you because you wanted this. Make it work, and I don't want to hear anything else about this, and that, and that. Find a way to make it work because you want to be the guy, then be the guy in New York and try to make it work to the best of your ability.
And his wife wants to stay.
Well, and I respect
Mrs.
that.
Anthony's got to be happy.
Freddie, I respect that decision of Carmelo's. Granted, he came to New York as a free agent, but he wants to build something here. Sure. He wants to build New York from the bottom up. You want laundry.
You like laundry.
Look, man,
even though the laundry was Denver originally, though.
It was Denver, but he didn't pick a super team to go join. And you're right, man, I do root for the organization.
He picked the marketing
I do root for the laundry, and the players come second to that.
Yeah.
And he could have revitalized one of the historic franchises in the NBA, or he wants to, or he still plans to, and that is incredibly respectful. The only challenge, the only problem is he actually, sooner or later here, has to take the same role here in New York that he would have to take in a championship contender scenario. He's going to have to be the #2 guy to Porzingis sooner or later. That's how the Knicks reach their full rebuild. That's how they reach their back to the top.
The other part of this equation that we've forgotten because it's been a while, obviously, but he also decimated their depth when he forced his way from Denver to New York.
Absolutely.
So that was another thing that he certainly miscalculated. It's just been a lot of miscalculations by Carmelo.
And here's another question. Who are going to be these free agents that want to play with Carmelo Anthony?
Nobody.
Thank you. That's another problem that nobody's talking
B-plus
about.
guys. That Aaron Aflalo, Robin Lopez, good players, not great players.
Right. If you're going to have those kind of players in your team, then you need a Batman and Robin.
Yeah.
You need a Durant and Westbrook.
Yeah.
You need a Curry and a Klay Thompson. The Knicks have a Carmelo, and let's be honest, at 31 years of age, he's getting to be a broken down player because that knee injury, I give him credit for playing through it, but you don't know how debilitating that's going to be next year or the year after. And then you got that albatross of a contract with a no-trade clause, and Phil Jackson's not going to be around after 3 or 4 years with the New York Knicks trying to rebuild this franchise. I think he goes back to the West Coast because his health may dictate that's going to happen. So now all of a sudden, you think you have a piece of Carmelo Anthony, you're going to have salary cap space, and free agents are going, I love New York, I'll play there against you, but I'm not going to play there with you because I don't think we're going to be better with me going to that basketball team. That's a problem.
Just look at Carmelo's history. He's a great player, man. Like, he is. He's an all-time great player.
Good score.
But
who does he make better? Like, let's look at his career arc. Who does he make better? The time he made the conference finals, who was the real leader of that Denver Nuggets team? The man who's working here now, Chauncey Billups. okay? That's the reality of it. Like, he's a really great player. Again, an all-time guy.
Second-round exit in the playoffs guy.
Right. But he needs to either become more self-aware and say, okay, I'm going to go somewhere else, but I got to take a secondary role. And taking a secondary role is not easy. We saw Dwayne Wade do it. He basically gave up his franchise and his city to LeBron. And now we look back at that and go, wow, that must have been really hard to do. Well, Carmelo's in a similar situation at a more accelerated age. So it's almost more important for him to do it at this stage, potentially.
Yeah, this has not been a great season for him. He's averaging 21.6 points per game, which is the lowest scoring average since his second season in the NBA, and that was to over 10 years ago. All right, moving along, he's a fierce pass rusher, but he's also proven to be trouble off the field and sometimes on the field. So what is the future of Greg Hardy, and does it include the Dallas Cowboys? We'll talk about that next. Hey, everybody, welcome back. So we have an interesting tweet. Stephen A. Smith actually tweeted us the show. He said, appreciate the crew filling in for me and Skip Bayless today, but it's weird seeing Will Kane, who's sitting to my right, sitting in my seat, and Freddie in Skip's seat. So I thought that was pretty weird.
Doesn't he take a day off?
Weird.
He does not. Stephen A., have a wonderful day off. He's not taking a day off. All right, so who is America's favorite quarterback? How about America's least favorite? Well, public policy polling asked just that, and here are the results. Tom Brady won most favorite and least favorite at the same time, but most interestingly was Tim Tebow being ranked 5th most favorite, and the last time he played in a regular season game, guys, was all the way back in 2012. And then, funny enough, that he was second on the list of the least favorite QBs in America, too. So a lot of love and also a lot of hate if you were put on these lists. So the question we pose, what is your reaction to Tim Tebow being so high on this list? George?
Do people just not watch television and realize that he's here and he's not playing in NFL games? That was my first reaction.
All that cord cutting going on with the cable.
Right, like what the hell's happening here? Like, are you not watching football? Do you not know that he doesn't play anymore? And I'm not saying that as a shot, but it makes me wonder when people vote on these polls. It made me think about all the other things that they vote on. Like, are any of these polls really accurate, whether it's Gallup or any of these other companies that are conducting them? Because it just feels strange that he's on the most loved and the most hated, and he's not playing. He hasn't played in a couple of years. That was my initial thought, at least.
The FOTs, fans of Tebow, are strong.
The FOTs.
The ones that are against him, Tebow, are equally strong. This is not an indictment on the poll as much as how much people still have Tebow as a part of their conversation, as a part of their mind, because whatever existed with the information being put into this poll, the fact that he is on the poll and Russell Wilson, Ben Roethlisberger are nowhere to be found when it comes to least favorite or favorite status with the quarterback. A guy that has not played in any kind of meaningful NFL game, like you said, Prim and Joy, since 2012, and yet he's on both of these lists. And believe me, we all know this. We worked in radio, we worked in TV. The mere mention of that guy's name will elicit a lot of strong reactions for and against. That's why I call them the FOTs. The fans of Tebow, when they see him, it's like one direction and one guy. That's who it is with Tim Tebow. The fact that he is on this list and hasn't played, that says a lot more, as much about him as an indictment on the poll, man.
How many of these people were Gator fans? That's my question. Like, were they Gator fans that were voting on this poll?
Well, I have to clarify that on this list, they specifically listed these 9 QBs, and then the 10th option was someone else or no favorite. So they didn't even put Ben Roethlisberger on there, so you can say whatever you want about the poll.
Well, we can say it's terrible then. It's a horrendous poll. What you're telling us is these were the options people were given. So, Tebow, to your question, it's not necessarily that a bunch of people were out there thinking about Tebow. They were provided the answer,
right,
and then they got to rank him. I mean, Tony Romo is one of the most divisive quarterbacks in the NFL.
Yes.
He is among the most and the least liked, and he's not on this list. That being said, just like a ridiculous NFL Combine question, it has value. The poll has value.
Oh, man.
And
we go back to that.
Tell us why it has value. Tell us, Will.
This poll shows you, in Tim Tebow's sustainable popularity, tells you something, and I'm not going to go into politics. However, it's similar to Donald Trump in this way. What Donald Trump reveals is there's a disconnect between popular culture, politics, sports, movies, New York, Los Angeles, and what a great swath of people think out there. Right or wrong, good or bad. They think a certain thing, and it's not reflected in their popular culture. Tim Tebow is that same phenomenon for different reasons.
But they still want him to
see
play.
Tim Tebow, and he reflects something in their culture, and we don't have to be coy about this. It is religion. It is Tim Tebow's ownership of his religion, him putting it out front as part of his identity. It simply divides people. And there are people out there who therefore love Tim Tebow because it is something they identify with. It's something in their religion. But no more prominently than Tim Tebow did. And what the fascinating thing is, not just that people rally to that and make him one of the most popular, it's his presence on least popular that's even more interesting. It also somehow engenders dislike.
Right.
For the same reason. People don't like you wearing your faith on the sleeve. They don't like you putting it out in front of them. And I think that's fascinating and shows you that people out there think certain ways about things that aren't often talked about in the media.
How much do you think race played a part with the favorite quarterback, with him? Because you would not see a black quarterback on that list like Ben
who hadn't played
who has not played in 3 years in the NFL, but you see Tim Tebow.
Well, let's be honest, okay? And I want to own my own filters. I want to own the way I analyze things. And I'll tell you this, Freddie. Race is not the first prism through which I view things.
Okay.
As you would expect, probably a white guy.
No, I don't expect it, but I'm just asking.
But it's not one I'm resistant to.
Okay.
I'm willing to accept that plays a role in many of these analyses. The Johnny Manziel analysis, I think it plays a role. I don't see it in this.
Okay.
I mean, Cam Newton is the 4th most popular quarterback. Granted, he's in the league and just played in the Super Bowl. But Tim Tebow is his own phenomenon. I don't know of a corollary that you can say, look, there's another quarterback not treated the same way as Tim Tebow, who was similarly religious, who was black. I think he just became his own symbol, and people rallied or were divided by that symbol.
Russell Wilson, again, is on the list, but he's below Tebow. But he's a
example.
guy who's openly religious, and he's won a Super Bowl, and he's marketable, and he's kind of boring, right? And I think that's kind of why we like him, because he's kind of boring. He doesn't really ever say anything. So I think that all that stuff plays into it, and yet Tebow's still ranked ahead of him. Granted, they only had whatever it was, 8, 9, 10 options or whatever it was. But the fact that he didn't finish last is amazing to me. I mean, even he got more votes than other. So there was an opportunity to vote, whether it was Roethlisberger, Romo, or anyone who wasn't on that list, and yet they still voted.
I just think that reflects, George, the chord he struck.
Sure.
Both positive for many and negative for others.
He's very likable in a lot of ways.
And reveals how disconnected many people feel from the things we all watch. Sports, movies, politics. They're disconnected until they see something like a Tim Tebow that resonates with them.
And I'm not trying to race bait here. But at the same time, I don't think we would have seen a black quarterback on that list who had the popularity of Tebow when he was playing and has been out of the league for 3 years. I don't think we would have seen, if Cam Newton had been out of the league for 3 years, I wonder if he would have been a part of that list. Like I said, I'm not race baiting here, but I think...
Well, hell, even Brett Favre isn't on the list, right? And that's someone who was very popular.
I look at a Tim Tebow, and plenty of people still wish he was still in the National Football League. And I'll say, there are plenty of white people, white Southern people, whether they're Florida fans or SEC fans, that still believes he's gotten a raw deal by not being in the National Football League. They see other quarterbacks think, well, Tim Tebow can play better than that guy, white or black. Tim Tebow, why is he not in the NFL? I think because of that support, not just saying all white fans root for Tebow. There are plenty of African-American fans. A buddy of mine, Marcus Patton, works here. Huge Tim Tebow fan. Wishes Tim Tebow still in the National Football League. But I don't think we would see that with a minority quarterback if he has been out of the league for 3 years, like we've seen with Tim Tebow on both sides. Positive and negative, being out of the league for 3 years.
I've been trying to reason with this in my head as we're talking about it. I mean, he was in a camp, right, this past offseason with the Philadelphia Eagles. So I guess maybe that kind of resonates with people, that he's at least, whether it was the Eagles, the Patriots, the Jets in recent years, he's at least been in a camp where his name has been discussed here over the last couple of years.
Just to your point on the role of race in this, Freddie, I do think this. I think that people, and there's no passing of judgment on this on my behalf. It's not positive. It's not negative. It just is. People gravitate to people they consider like them.
And you're comfortable with.
And well, comfort actually puts a value on it, I think. Just, you're similar to me.
True.
Right? You look like me. You act like me. You worship perhaps like me. And if Tim Tebow symbolized for so many people similarity, connection, that's why he's had this lasting impact. That's perhaps why a black quarterback in the exact same situation, to your point, wouldn't have retained that level of popularity. Because there are fewer people, just by sheer numbers of percentage of the population, who identify or see connection with an individual. Again, not good, Not bad.
It's
just
what it is. Right. And we don't know how this poll was broken down in terms of male, female, white, black, Hispanic, whatever. We still don't know. There could have been more white people, more black people. We don't know. But I'm just pointing it out there because I think that's a factor. I'm okay with that being a factor because you should feel comfortable who you're comfortable with. It shouldn't be at the expense of somebody else. I'll say that. But a lot of people identify with people like that, just like African Americans. Plenty of African Americans were in the corner of Cam Newton when he was taking a lot of beef and a lot of hits with dabbing. Everybody's, well, wait a minute. You know, we celebrate your culture when you do something. That's part of our culture. Why can't you celebrate that? Why is that a detriment when we do it, but it's not a detriment when you do it?
I'm also not naive to think that the reason he's the second most hated is because of religion as well. But I think what else plays into it is this. Us talking about him all the time. And constantly like, oh, is he going to make this team? Is he going to make that team?
We never talk about Tim Tebow here.
Never. So we have to look at ourselves and say we're part of the reason why he's also the second most
Because many people feel force-fed to
right,
Tim Tebow.
Exactly.
Right.
To me, race, color doesn't really matter. I think it's sometimes as simple as his likability. He just seems like a really nice guy.
That's huge for him. Sometimes we discount
especially
that
from the female
perspective.
perspective. Seems just like a nice guy.
He doesn't lip sync battle very well, though. I like the Rocky
Oh, well then.
I didn't necessarily
Not
did a great
everybody
job there.
can.
I mean, not everybody can do all that, you know.
I mean, he did the physical part, but the lip syncing part.
He's a physical guy.
Judgy Wudgy was a bear. All right, coming up next, Melo does not seem very happy with the current state of the Knicks. Is there a better team out there for him? We'll debate after the break.
First Take is brought to you by Joseph A. Bank, unparalleled heritage of quality men's attire. Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance. And Applebee's 2 for $20 menu.
The Beard posted his 8th 40-point game this season as he pulled into a tie with Steph Curry for the league lead this season. But James Harden's performance did not suffice as the Rockets fell to the Jazz in overtime. And with that, they fell out of the playoff race in the West. So we took a poll asking if he's overrated. And here are the results. 57% yes, he is overrated. 43% said no. So do you guys think Harden is overrated? Well,
I do. I'm surprised that I'm in the majority. I thought that it would be an unpopular opinion.
You're typically in the minority.
It's true. It's true. The words are important. Overrated. It doesn't mean James Harden isn't great. He's one of the best players in the league. Is he overrated, though? Yes, because he's been in the MVP discussion. I think many of the conversations and conversational points we had about Carmelo Anthony can apply to James Harden. You asked earlier, George, who has he made better?
Yeah.
And you can ask the same thing about James Harden. What player has he made better? What teammate has he made better? James Harden is great. I don't know that he is the #1 player on a team that can win the NBA championship in modern-day basketball, passing and sharing and flowing the ball.
I'm more on your side on this, and I know what people are going to say. Oh, he got to the Western Conference Finals last year. Okay, that's fine. And look, they ran into a Clippers team that was basically running 6.5 guys out there, and they ran out of gas, and they collapsed. Harden had a great season, but it's clear that Dwight is frustrated, okay? And I know Dwight is in the latter stages of his career, and it just seems pretty obvious that he hates playing there. The perfect example was yesterday. If you're watching that game against Utah, first quarter, they're coming off a pick and roll, right? Here comes Dwight rolling to the basket. He's so used to James going and taking the shot that when James tried to alley-oop it to him, it hit the backboard. And James is screaming, going like, what? Come on, man. And Dwight's like, I didn't know you were going to pass that ball. Like, that's in essence what their relationship is.
He's not over. He's properly rated. He is who he is. You knew what you were getting when you were the Houston Rockets with a guy like that was not going to be that kind of facilitator unless it came to triple-double numbers. So he's properly rated because he's averaged 25, 25, 27, 28. He scores the basketball. He doesn't leave a lot of room for anybody else. So I don't know about overrated, underrated. He's properly rated because that's who he is, and you need somebody else that can go along with that, and Houston does not have that guy right
15.
Real quick, Jamel Hill, I know you're coming up next on his and hers. Thank you for making me a meme today. That's what you did. You made me a
And
meme.
Stephen A. too. He's yelling at us too. And you know what? The beard's not overrated either.
It's the
Isn't
George
hers?
face.
Up next, Jamel and Michael. Well, Monday marked the 5-year anniversary of the blockbuster trade that sent Carmelo Anthony to the Big Apple. And it's safe to say He expected way more during his time in New York. The Knicks have dropped 12 of their last 14, and since Melo arrived in 2011, the Knicks have a mediocre 189 and 230 record. The 12-year veteran had this to say this week to reporters: "It's been tough, it's challenging. It's challenging to kind of stay strong and positive through all this." When you look at it, how many different coaches? 4 different coaches, a lot of different players. I mean, that's a lot to go through. Regardless of the record, just losing, it is hard to accept that. You can't be satisfied with losing basketball games. So Carmelo, he won't be a free agent until the summer of 2019, and he does have a no-trade clause. So where is the best fit for Melo? I'm going to go to the NBA guy, George.
Clearly, it's not New York. But look, he can complain about this all he wants. This is all his own doing. He chose to sign there. He chose to go back to New York. And whether it was for the extra year and the extra security and extra money or the legacy of being an all-time Knick, he chose that. And now he's upset by it and annoyed by the timeline of the Knicks and it not being up to speed with where he wants to be as far as trying to win a championship. Clearly he wants to win a championship, but clearly he also didn't think this through when making his decision a while back. So here's the deal. If you're Carmelo Anthony, there are a couple of things you have to think about. Number one, obviously you have to waive your no-trade clause. Number two, who are those teams that he would waive his no-trade clause to? It's pure speculation on my part, just a guess. Off the top of my head, Clippers, Bulls, Miami, maybe Houston, but that's pretty much it. So there's those 3 or 4 teams that he would do it for. Now, on those teams, would he be willing to take a secondary role? It doesn't seem like that's the case. I've actually had this conversation with Ian O'Connor from ESPN.com. He's a longtime New York writer, and he basically said to me that when Carmelo was asked that, he kind of looked at people with the side eye like, what? What are you talking about? And that's going to be part of it. You have to be willing to sacrifice. We were talking earlier about Kevin Durant and LeBron and all those guys. They made sacrifices. Like Durant would certainly have to make some concessions if he went to the Warriors. He makes them now with Russell Westbrook. LeBron made those with Wade and Bosh. He's trying to make those with Kyrie and Love. That's part of the deal. So if he's willing to do that, maybe the Clippers make some sense. He's very close to Chris Paul. Miami makes some sense. He's very close to Dwayne Wade. And in those places, he may not be the number 1, but he could be the 1A or the 2. And if he goes to one of those places, I think he can flourish potentially in that role. As the number 1 guy, I just don't see it at this stage of his career. And they need to take advantage of this now because his value is only going to get worse as they move forward, and you never get dollar for dollar on these superstar deals. It's very rare that that's the case. So this is the offseason. If you're going to move him, you got to convince him to move now.
We talked about this morning. On a championship contender, a championship team, you're constructing it. Where on your pecking order would you expect Carmelo Anthony to be? Your top player?
No.
Second player?
Maybe.
Third player?
Second, I bet.
Probably.
Okay, so second or third player. Next question. Is Carmelo Anthony willing to be a second or third player on your team? You just suggested probably not.
Doesn't seem
so
like.
The mathematical equation is Carmelo Anthony does not belong on a championship team. There is not a championship team where Carmelo Anthony is on that team. That's the simple math of the debate. Now, maybe Carmelo changes his attitude, changes his approach to the game. But that being said, he can still be the top player on a good team. I looked at this after our debate this morning, George. A team, and you laid out the teams that he'd be willing to go to. But let's set that aside for a minute. How about just from the team's perspective? Would you be willing to take on Carmelo? A team like Dallas, I agree on Miami. A team like Dallas, maybe Boston, you could still be the number 1 guy. There's a good supporting cast in Dirk and Chandler Parsons. That elevates you from like a 5-6 seed first-round exit into possibly a 3rd seed, 4th seed, second-round playoff team, which, quite honestly, that's Carmelo's peak. That's what it was when he's with the Nuggets. That's what he is. He's the number 1 player on a team that goes out in the second round of the playoffs. That's what he's been. I would suggest that's what he's always going to be. If you want him to be more, you're asking him to be somebody other than Carmelo Anthony. You're asking him to be the second or third player on a team that can actually win a championship, and he can't be that guy. Or he hasn't shown yet that he can be that guy.
He can only be that guy on an Olympic team because you have a galaxy of stars. And he can shoot the basketball. We had that one game in the Olympics. It seemed like every shot he put up, he was just knocking them down. But that's an Olympic team, an Olympic exhibition situation compared to the rigors of the NBA. To George's point, he wanted this. You know what, Carmelo? Your best fit is New York. you got to find a way to make this work. Now, I'll give him credit this year. He's trying to play through the knee injury. He has played through it. When he's been out, the Knicks have not won a game without him. We know as they're constructed. And I told Knicks fans this. Oh, we're going to make the playoffs. You're a 35, 40-win team at best. They're proving my point right now. Because the pieces that they have, it's still a work in progress. He's been a better rebounder. He has not been an unwilling defender, as unwilling of a defender we've seen in recent years, although it's easy to go from 0 to 1 when it comes to playing defense in the NBA when you're Carmelo Anthony. But you wanted to make this work. You decided that whatever bill of goods Phil Jackson sold you, that you were convinced. Yeah, money played a big part. 5 years, $124 million. You got the max contract. So, yeah, the money was the main thing. And staying in New York with your family because your family didn't want to leave New York, fine. Then the best fit for you is New York because now you have to make it work. I don't want to hear any excuses. And I'm a Carmelo Anthony fan, but I call it as I see it. If you're going to be that guy, then what do you do? What are you going to have to do to be willing to change that perception or change for the betterment of your basketball team? If you're not able to do that, then you know what? You get what you deserve because this is what you wanted. That's why you pushed your way out of Denver, and that's why you re-signed with New York. There are better opportunities out there because I know if I was in that situation and I'm being wined and dined by Chicago or Houston or Dallas, there's no way I'm going back to New York. I can get that kind of money with the NBA salary cap going up soon anyway to $92 million potentially next year and north of $110 million after that. I would have gotten my money and been in a better position. He decided to come back because he said, I want to win a championship here, and I want to be the lead guy to do it. Fine. Then New York is the best fit for you because you wanted this. Make it work, and I don't want to hear anything else about this, and that, and that. Find a way to make it work because you want to be the guy, then be the guy in New York and try to make it work to the best of your ability.
And his wife wants to stay.
Well, and I respect
Mrs. Anthony's got to be happy.
Freddie, I respect that decision of Carmelo's. Granted, he came to New York as a free agent, but he wants to build something here. He wants to build New York from the bottom up.
Laundry. You want laundry. You like laundry.
Look, man,
even though the laundry was Denver originally, though.
It was Denver, but he didn't pick a super team to go join. And you're right, man, I do root for the organization.
He picked the marketing
I do root for the laundry, and the players come second to that. And he could have revitalized one of the historic franchises in the NBA, or he wants to, or he still plans to, and that is incredibly respectful. The only challenge, the only problem is he actually, sooner or later here, has to take the same role here in New York that he would have to take in a championship contender scenario. He's going to have to be the #2 guy to Porzingis sooner or later. That's how the Knicks reach their full rebuild. That's how they reach their back to the top.
The other part of this equation that we've forgotten because it's been a while, obviously, but he also decimated their depth when he forced his way from Denver to New York.
Absolutely.
So that was another thing that he certainly miscalculated. It's just been a lot of miscalculations by Carmelo.
And here's another question. Who are going to be these free agents that want to play with Carmelo Anthony? Thank you. That's another problem.
B-minus, B-plus guys. Aaron Aflalo, Robin Lopez. Good players, not great players.
Right. If you're going to have those kind of players in your team, then you need a Batman and Robin.
Yeah.
You need a Durant and Westbrook. Yeah. You need a Curry and a Klay Thompson. The Knicks have a Carmelo, and let's be honest, at 31 years of age, he's getting to be a broken down player because that knee injury, I give him credit for playing through it, but you don't know how debilitating that's going to be next year or the year after. And then you got that albatross of a contract with a no-trade clause, and Phil Jackson's not going to be around after 3 or 4 years with the New York Knicks trying to rebuild this franchise. I think he goes back to the West Coast because his health may dictate that's going to happen. So now all of a sudden, you think you have a piece of Carmelo Anthony, you're going to have salary cap space, and free agents are going, I love New York. I'll play there against you, but I'm not going to play there with you because I don't think we're going to be better with me going to that basketball team. That's a problem.
Just look at Carmelo's history. He's a great player, man. Like he is. He's an all-time great player.
Good score.
But
who does he make better? Like, let's look at his career arc. Who does he make better? The time he made the conference finals, who was the real leader of that Denver Nuggets team? The man who's working here now, Chauncey Billups. Okay? That's the reality of it. Like, he's a really great player. Again, an all-time guy.
Second-round exit in the playoffs guy.
Right. But he needs to either become more self-aware and say, okay, I'm going to go somewhere else, but I got to take a secondary role. And taking a secondary role is not easy. We saw Dwayne Wade do it. He basically gave up his franchise and his city to LeBron. And now we look back at that and go, wow, that must have been really hard to do. Well, Carmelo's in a similar situation at a more accelerated age. So it's almost more important for him to do it at this stage, potentially.
Yeah, this has not been a great season for him. He's averaging 21.6 points per game, which is the lowest scoring average since his second season in the NBA, and that was over 10 years ago. All right, moving along.